It all happened so fast. One moment I was just living my life like any other day, and then, before I knew it, everything had changed. I couldn't even wrap my head around what was happening. The more I thought about that moment, the more the guilt kept building up inside me. I thought maybe talking about it would help, but what if it only made things worse? Still, keeping this secret felt like carrying around a heavy weight, one I couldn't hold anymore. Truth be told, I'm ashamed to even talk about it. But maybe telling the truth is the only way to finally let go of everything that's been haunting me. It was just another evening. My mom, Kathy Marshall, was still working at the office, like she always did. She loved her job and everyone knew it. Being Kathy Marshall meant being strong, responsible, and always in control. She was a procurement manager at a large company, and she often worked late into the night. Some nights, she didn't even come home. Growing up with a mom like that had its ups and downs. On one hand, I was proud of her, but on the other, I always felt a little lonely. For her, working hard was just a normal part of life. That evening, it was just me and Hector at home, my mom's husband. Hector seemed perfect to everyone. He was 45, muscular, well-groomed, and worked as a human resources manager. On the outside, he was everything you'd expect from a guy in his position. Charming, polite, and charismatic. But that night, he was so much more in my eyes. Let me introduce myself. I'm Grace. I'm 23 years old, and in my last year of architecture school. I've always liked to keep my life organized. Thanks to my love for sports, I've always stayed in shape and was the captain of my university's volleyball team. That gave me a bit of a special status with my friends and even in how I saw myself. I like to take care of myself. My hair, my skin, my clothes, they always had to be perfect. I used to think of myself as strong, disciplined, and in control. Until that night. That night started out like any other, but soon I realized it was nothing like the usual. It felt different in a way I couldn't explain. Now, if you enjoy hearing stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the rest of this journey. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. I had prepared a nice dinner for my mom and Hector. My mom had come home earlier than usual, but as usual, she didn't lift her head from her laptop. Even when we sat down for dinner, she was glued to her phone, checking notifications. That's just how my mom was. Always dedicated to her work. She was disciplined and organized, and in her mind, that was just part of being successful. But as I looked at Hector, I noticed something different in him. Something had changed between them in the past year. Hector was always calm, mature, and romantic. When he and my mom started dating, we used to talk about those qualities of his, how sweet and thoughtful he was. But now, I couldn't help but notice the sadness behind his eyes. Dinner was quiet. Everyone complimented the food, and even my mom, in between quick bites, managed to say, "This is amazing, Grace. Thank you." But before we could finish, she grabbed her bag and said, "I've got some things to finish at the office. I might be late." And just like that, she was gone. When Hector closed the door behind her, he came back to the table, his face looking tired. I started clearing the plates while he poured himself a glass of water. He stared out the window, his usual cheerful energy replaced by something heavy. After finishing the dishes, I walked into the living room. Hector was sitting on the couch, staring at the dark TV screen. I sat down next to him and asked, "You okay?" He seemed startled, like he hadn't realized I was there. He turned his head and gave me a weak smile. "I'm fine, Grace. Just a little tired." But I could tell he was lying. Something wasn't right. The silence between us hung thick in the air, and after a moment, I spoke again. "You know, Hector, I'm not used to seeing you like this." He paused, took a deep breath, and then said, "Some days are harder than others. Kathy's job, her passion. I get it. But sometimes, I just feel lonely." I had never heard Hector admit something like that. He was always so composed and calm. But in that moment, he was vulnerable, human. All I could do was nod and say, "You're right." The room fell silent again. It was like this weight had settled between us, pulling us closer in a strange way. I wanted to comfort him, to make him feel better. But I didn't know how. After Mom left, Hector put on a movie. He stretched out on the couch, lazily flipping through channels, his eyes on the screen but clearly not focused. I decided to make coffee. Not because I was craving it, but because I didn't want him to feel alone. A few minutes later, I came back with 2 mugs of coffee. "I made one for you too," I said, offering him a mug. He smiled a little, surprised. "Thanks, Grace. That's really thoughtful." I sat down at the other end of the couch, but even though there was some space between us, it still felt different. On the TV, a romantic movie was playing. Hector was a romantic at heart, but I hadn't expected him to watch something so cliché. I couldn't help but smile slightly. "You watch these kinds of movies?" I teased. He shrugged. "Sometimes they're good for taking your mind off things. Besides, a little emotional moment here, and there isn't so bad. Right?" As we watched the movie, the conversation between us flowed more easily. We laughed, made comments about the scenes, and even debated the characters' choices. Hector's calm, deep voice and the way he gave me his full attention stirred something inside me. The movie itself became almost irrelevant, as the quiet moments between us grew more intense. At one point, I caught him looking at me. At first, he didn't say anything, but I noticed him quickly look away. That's when I realized I had crossed my legs, and my shorts had ridden up slightly. My tank top had shifted, hugging me a little more than usual. As I adjusted myself, I couldn't help but wonder, was he looking at me for a reason, or was I just imagining it? The tension between us was almost unbearable. Even though he didn't say anything, his gaze lingered, and I could feel my heart racing. It made me nervous, excited, and completely confused all at once. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "I think I'm getting a bit tired," I said abruptly, standing up. "I'm going to head upstairs and get some rest." Hector gave a small nod, his voice soft. "Of course, Grace. Good night." I quickly retreated to my room, my heart still pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feelings I had just experienced. The way he had looked at me, the tension that had been building between us. It scared me, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, everything felt different. I felt a deep sense of guilt, but I couldn't rid myself of the thoughts I had been carrying since that night. And as the days went on, it only got worse. I found myself becoming more and more aware of Hector, of how close we were when we were alone. Those small moments, the ones where our eyes met, felt electric. But at the same time, I hated myself for feeling this way. And then that night came again. Mom was at the office and once more the house was quiet. But this time it wasn't the calm I was used to. There was a strange, undeniable tension hanging in the air. My thoughts were racing, and I knew something was going to happen. I didn't want to sleep, couldn't. My mind was too loud with thoughts of Hector and the emotions that kept swirling around. So I got up, wearing my favorite red satin nightgown, and went downstairs for a glass of water. And there he was, Hector, shirtless, his broad back lit by the soft light in the kitchen. My breath caught in my throat. "Grace?" he asked, surprised to see me. "Can't sleep." I nodded, trying to pull myself together. "Yeah, something like that." Hector smiled a little and poured another glass of wine. "Well, sometimes you just need to clear your head. Want to join me?" I hesitated for a moment, but then I said, "Sure." And as we talked, something shifted between us. The wine loosened our words, and before I knew it, we were laughing, talking about everything from my mom to our lives in general. Felt easy with him, but also dangerous. There was something about the way he looked at me, something that made my heart race and my head spin. We moved to the living room, and as the night wore on, the space between us grew smaller, physically and emotionally. He was so close now. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, his gaze never leaving mine. Then, in the midst of everything, I whispered, "You're really handsome, Hector." His eyes softened, and for a moment, it was just the two of us. No one else. The rest of the world faded away, and all that mattered was the way his arms pulled me in, the way our lips met in a kiss full of passion. I couldn't stop myself. Neither of us could. The night became a blur of touches, kisses, and feelings I didn't know how to process. And when the morning came, it was nothing but shame. I woke up, the memories flooding back, and I couldn't escape it. What had I done? I couldn't stay. I had to leave. So, I packed up my things and slipped out in the early morning hours, not knowing how to explain anything. But I knew one thing for sure. I had to get away. I had to save myself. If you've made it this far, you probably have a lot on your mind. Trust me, there's more to the story, and you won't want to miss a thing. Don't forget to hit that follow button and turn on your notifications. Let's talk in the comments. Your support means the world to me.